All right. Hi, Chance. Welcome to the Science and Magic podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, before we kind of get started into what you do, I always like to start these interviews from this perspective of like who you are and how you came to be who you are. So, I'll start by asking the question of kind of anything you want to share about where you grew up, what your family like life might have been like, or anything from your childhood that you feel like might be relevant into who you've become.
Yeah, I was raised by both my parents. I was born Riverside, Minneapolis. Did a lot of growing up in the suburb of Minnetonka, near Lake Minnetonka. Um, I have four older brothers, so my parents met. They already had kids, so I have a half brother on my dad's side, and two half brothers on my mom's side, and then a brother with both the same parents, and multicultural. I have my dad is from Louisiana, African American. My mom is from like northern Minnesota, the Iron Range, like as like Nordic as it gets. And I don't know. Overall, I think just being the youngest brother and I was trying to keep up with my brothers um, made me very interested in just being like physical, like sports and stuff like that. And I've always been kind of fascinated with comic books, particularly the X-Men and superheroes and stuff like that. And I think that really I'd say those are the biggest influences that stand out. My family, kind of like sports and physicality, and superpowers.
I didn't know you were the baby of the family. That's awesome. um, I know, we met nearly a decade ago in the performing arts scene, in the local music scene, and now here we are in the wellness world together. And I think there's so many ways that those two communities can coexist. But I would love to know more about that time in your life. And I know you're still a musician, but kind of how you were a musician, a decade ago when we connected, and what your life was like then.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I guess I could tie it back to a childhood story as well. When I was the littlest brother, right? I was 5 years old, and my dad bought Michael Jackson tickets. So we went to see the Bad tour at what is now the Mall of America, but it used to be called the Metropolitan Stadium. So that was my first big stadium show. Michael Jackson, the King of Pop. I'd already been like rehearsing, like singing into a comb and like dancing around my living room. So seeing music and the power of that, and just like always feeling like I was a performer, um, brought me into just like realizing that or like manifesting that. So in college, I had a band. We were just like a party band. I rapped. We played some kind of like mix between like dub rock, of the era type stuff. I don't know. We were trying to be, I don't know, sublime. Like I don't know. But I had a band. We were able to have quite a fair amount of success for being as like naive and dumb as we were. We just had enough kind of like headwind, just purely being I don't know, just motivated. Like we just wanted it really bad, so we were like, you know, made a record in some little basement studio somewhere and just kept doing that. And I was with that band for about, must have been 7 or 8 years. We had various types of success. This was like the MySpace era, so we were just like reaching out to venues on MySpace Messenger and being like, hey, this and that. We'd had a publicist help us get some placements on TV. Some of our music was on the Kardashian Show, The Real World, like these random pop pop weird things where like our weird type of music was selected to be on these shows. So then off that on MySpace, that was like some pretty serious clout to be like, hey, well, our song, even though it wasn't like I don't know how it worked, but we were able to book entire tours off of like straight up DIY stuff, and we toured all around the country, southern United States, eastern United States. Lived in a Winnebago for like months at a time, like a Winnebago from the 70s. Me and my buddies, and we just did that for a long time. And I can't remember if that must have been when I met you, because that was roughly 2010 where that band came to an end. We played at the Fine Line, a sold-out show with some other friends, More Than Lights. And then the following month, we started a new band. So like two of the members of that band, we brought in Eric Mason, real good friend of mine still, and made Crunchy Kids. And just kind of like totally shifted directions and like changed the whole team, or changed the whole music, the vibe, and all that stuff, but kind of didn't really lose momentum. In fact, we might have even gained more momentum with that upgrade or that update. And like I said, I was more or less living in a Winnebago, like an old crappy Winnebago from the 70s, and ended up having a kid on the way. So it was like I can't raise a kid in this Winnebago. So I got more interested in like education. I'd always been a educator. I'd worked with the Minnesota Reading Corps for the Minnesota Literacy Council, and I'd been working in schools in North Minneapolis just as like my day job over the course of the 8 years of being a musician, and yeah, so I just started doing a lot more education stuff. I was getting my master's in teaching while Crunchy Kids was pretty successful. Like we were doing a lot of stuff, but I don't know. At some point, I just got majorly burnt out on everything. I had 2 kids in diapers. I was working on my master's degree. I had a successful band. I was still paying the bills, working a day job in social work, and yeah, so I mean, I met you somewhere in there, sometime in that tumultuous phase of my life.
Yeah, and I look back at that time period too, like a decade ago, and I'm a dancer, but how we met was I was booking shows and planning events for artists, and there was just this sweetness of that time when we were kind of like, I wasn't living out of a Winnebago, but I was like going to music festivals and we're hanging out with friends and there's lots of potlucks, and it was this really awesome communal time, and the Twin Cities has a really rich and supportive art and music scene, and I love that here we are 10 years later still collaborating in this way. So I wanted to name that, for listeners, Chance is a musician and performer, and we share that love, myself as a performer, as a dancer, and also I just have a sweet spot for performers in music and art and all of these things. I remember us sitting down when you were going to be onboarded for Science and Magic and start teaching on the platform, and we were at the co-op kind of connecting, and you shared with me the story of how you started being interested in yoga and well-being. And it was, I don't remember the exact story, but it was something about a book falling off of a shelf at a really synchronistic time. Could you share that story of when that tipping point was for you?
Wow, yeah, that's actually like 2 stories, because at first I thought you were talking about like how did I get into yoga. The reason I got into yoga was because this was before the story that I was telling you, but I was at Barnes and Noble buying my books for college. I was a college freshman. I was going to school in North Dakota. Don't ask me why. I just wound up there. and I'd I'd heard somewhere from a movie or something that like yoga made you good in bed. So I was like, oh, yoga for dummies. Like sitting on the register was like all these pocket for dummies things. It's like, all these random skills. And I was like, yoga for dummies. I'm going to read that thing. So I did first get interested and start practicing yoga because of Yoga for Dummies, the pocket edition. And that was the only instruction I had up until like probably like 5 years ago. So 15 years I was practicing yoga simply off of what that book taught me. The story that I was telling you had to do with, somewhere through that burning out, in that stage where I just had way too much on my plate and I was just, nothing was giving me any satisfaction. I just was stretched in too many directions. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was, struggling with all types of stuff. And I just hit this crazy deep depression where I couldn't get out of it. Like nothing brought me joy. I was just, like looking at my kids. I think I had a 2-year-old at the time, just like fragile and cute. And I was just like, I just felt like something bad was going to happen, or like, I just couldn't find joy. Like nothing about anything in my life was making me feel any sense of okay. I was, so whatever this was like, it was a breakthrough, but at the time it was very scary and I didn't know what was going on. And the thing that I'd noticed was this book that I think I'd bought, while I was at Goodwill or something, and just bought this book for whatever reason. And for whatever reason, like years later, it had come off my bookshelf. I'd never read it. I didn't really even know much about it. Like maybe the title of it had caught my eye at the time, but then like all of a sudden it's like sitting on my dining room table. The kids had it or something. I don't know how it got there, but I was like, what is this? And I like picked it up and like read the back of it, and it's like for uncertain times and all this stuff, and it just like spoke precisely to what I was going through, where I was just like worried about the future. I was just, anxious. Everything was giving me anxiety. Nothing was giving me joy. And I was like, I should read this. So I started reading it, and by the time I was done with like the foreword or whatever, I'm like, oh, this is a book about yoga. Like this is, I can't even remember the name of the book. I can't remember what the book was. But I was like, oh yeah, yoga. Like I haven't really been doing that much in the past, when times started getting really rough. I just got too busy and wasn't taking care of myself. And, more or less probably what they would call a midlife crisis, because, all of the old formats and systems and beliefs that I had were no longer serving me. So I was going through this transition, and I was like, yoga, oh yeah, I remember how good yoga makes me feel. I remember like that I should be doing that more often. So I'm reading this book, and there's a guided meditation, and the meditation was just basic. It was like breathe, like imagine light, like feel your body. And it was the first time I'd felt okay in probably months, so that was a reminder where I was like, wow, like this is important. And somewhere in that book it was like, it's easy to get in the routine of thinking about what we don't want, like that's what causes anxiety when we're just picturing the worst case scenario everywhere we look. And it's just like, what do you want? Like what do you want? So I started making it a kind of regular practice to start just meditating on what it is that I wanted. And by doing so, I came to the realization that I wanted to do something along the lines of something that made me do more yoga, some career that was different than what I was doing, like all of this stuff, and more or less, manifested a teacher like out of nowhere. Like it was wasn't out of nowhere, but it seemed like what the hell, it seemed like magic when I met this person, and they're like, you should be teaching yoga. I was like, how did you know? Like, how come no one's ever told me this? I didn't know it was possible, like I didn't know I could. And never, like, it was definitely somebody else's idea that I teach yoga, but it was in alignment with me searching for a new career and a reason to practice more of this internal searching. So yeah, that's how I got to that phase of my journey, was just the book showing up when it needed to. Can't even remember the book, but it was just, it pointed me back toward like, looking inward.
That's such a powerful story because I think there's a lot of people out there who also feel immense amounts of anxiety and worry and aren't sure what to do about it. And I think, both of us as practitioners who help people to get into their bodies, it's such an important skill set to have. And when I also come from having experienced high amounts of anxiety through being in the performing arts, kind of music industry, booking industry, that I had to rework back into, okay, how do I work with my nervous system? How do I bring my body with me to work? How do I put self-care as a priority? And I need to say, Chance, like, thank goodness you're sharing yoga because you are such a refreshing instructor. I really think and feel, and I know a lot of the Science and Magic members feel this way too, is you offer from a genuine place. Like, it feels like you're not just offering a script, you're bringing you into the guidance, and that's very calming, and I admire you so much for doing that. So I'm so grateful whoever it was urged you to step on this path because it's such a gift to so many. I looked at your Facebook page, and I loved what you wrote there, so I want to share it. My passion is helping people see their true potential. In this modern world, we're removed from the lifestyle our body was built to enjoy. I've turned my love of ancient wisdom and modern science into courses and practices to restore our natural feel good. As we rediscover our true selves, we align to our purpose, our satisfaction, and our needed impact in the world. So this is something that I can really resonate with, and our work aligns in so many ways. And I'm curious, can you speak to this connection between how we nourish the body while simultaneously realigning to our purpose? How are these things actually connected? Like, our purpose isn't outside of us. How do you work with clients or within yourself to realign them to their purpose through their bodies?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and even when I start talking about it, like I just realize it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Like, whether you're trying to decrease anxiety or find more purpose in life or reconnect to the body and get out of the mind or whatever, it's all the same thing. It's about coming back. It's about coming back to center or whatever. So how I do that, I guess, I mean, adding on to what you said earlier about just being authentic, that's all I really see that I'm doing, is creating an experience where it's safe to look inward, or safer to look inward, to feel a little bit more confident, because I work with all different kinds of people, all different backgrounds, education levels, ages. Like, I work with 5-year-olds. I teach 5-year-olds how to meditate. I teach 80-year-olds how to meditate. I work in corporate. I work in healthcare. I work in education. It's all the same thing. All I'm doing is pointing people inward, back here, because there is an innate wisdom. There's a divine knowing. There's a type of omnipotence where your heart knows how to beat, your blood knows how to flow, your cells know how to regenerate and split and reproduce, and they all know where they're going. So it's a trust of, like, your biology's got your back, but the biggest obstacle to it is your story that you tell. So the mind gets in the way. We stress ourselves out. We disembody ourselves by being worried about a future we can't control, or dwelling in a past that we can't change. And really what it all comes down to is being in touch with that trust that your body's got your back, and you just need to give it more attention. And whether that's yoga or meditation or life coaching, mindfulness, whatever, it's all the same thing, in my opinion. And that is, the world is coming from you more than it's coming at you.
That's so good. Your biology and your body have your back. That's it. And that's the approach that I take too, of how do we carve out space for you to connect to you, because you know what you need and your body knows what you need. And so carving out space to build that connection will help us all reawaken to our purposes. It's such a beautiful approach. So in your sharings, and even right now, you talk a lot about the power of perspective and how we can kind of consciously choose the way we see the environment and the world comes from within us. Can you share an example of a perspective shift for yourself that's created a powerful change in your life, or maybe one that you've witnessed in someone else?
Whoa, yeah, tons. I mean, every day I have an example. I was like, there's so many, there's so many that I could pick from. So I don't want to make it like too vast, but just the simplest ones. When I like help coach people, there's a really simple perspective shift of because everything comes down to your relationship with the world, right? With yourself, with the world. It all comes down to how you relate. And that's a quote from Bruce Lee where, he says, all types of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge. And another quote that he has is, life is a constant process of relating. And that's all it is. It's all about, your story is the one that you tell you tell yourself over and over again. Unconsciously, we're telling ourselves a story all the time about who we are, what we like, what we don't, so on. And these simple shifts in perspective change the entire story of what we believe. So therefore, where it's headed. Like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, what's to come. Like how's this story end, or what's the next chapter look like, or whatever. So a really helpful perspective shift that I use often and I share with people often. I've heard it from several sources, so I don't want to like basically everything I'm telling you I learned from someone else. I'm not like just full of awesome quotes, but I don't always remember where I heard the quotes. So this technique, I believe, I can directly remember Brennan Burchard saying. He's a life coach, kind of mindset coach guy. But it's a simple practice of the I got to, I get to. So when we go through just imagine a busy day in your life, like a stressful day in your life. Oh, I gotta get up really early. I gotta, feed these dogs. I gotta feed these kids. I gotta do this. I gotta sit in traffic. I gotta go teach this class. I gotta do this. And you tell the story as I got to or I have to, right? As though it's a burden. And by simply shifting that into I get to wake up early. I get to feed these dogs. I get to, wake up these kids. I get to, sit in my car in traffic. I get to go, and just simply turning all of the things that you're, complaining about into your blessings. Like you get to do this is a very simple perspective shift that will not only like just change and grow more impactful every time you practice it, but just bring you back into the truth. And the truth is, no matter how bad your life is, somebody's got it worse, and most likely they might have a better attitude about it than you do. So on the whole range of things, as we live in this world of I'd say excess or opportunity or abundance or whatever, we have a lot of options. Not saying like everyone is in the exact same boat. We're not in the same boat. We're all on the same river, different boats. That was just in a conversation I had before this. We're all in the same river flowing towards something, but we're all in our own uniquely different boat. You're born into a set of circumstances, then those circumstances lead to you being able to build skills or, to accumulate trauma or whatever. We all are we're all unique, but we're all connected. And when you do this, you find compassion for others because mostly the things that we complain about are directly tied to our blessings. We're complaining about our blessings. So I gotta get up early. It's like, I'm lucky to be able to get up early. I gotta feed these dogs. I'm lucky to have these dogs. I gotta do this. I'm lucky to have those kids. Because everything is temporary. You know what? Dogs die. People die. Cars break down. Jobs vanish. All the stuff that you're currently complaining about in some way, shape, or form is inspired by a blessing that you currently have that you are not appreciating, you're complaining about. And you know, to some degree, that's helpful perspective, because like I know me myself, the, you know, the tendency, the story, the basically baseline human nature is we think poor me. That's the tone of the narrator. It's like, poor me, you know, like this seems hard. I don't want it. And I think it's just helpful to do that. I get to. If you catch yourself saying, I have to do this, what does it feel like? You know, simple word shift, but a completely different change in tone and meaning, you know, because, you know, even like no matter how shitty your past is, there's no way you can change the past, but you can change the meaning of the past, you know, that's where the work takes place. What is the story you're telling yourself? Do you even realize you're telling yourself a story? And what would be a more fruitful, helpful story, role / you know, character that you are embodying that'll bring you toward where you actually want to go, your truest self.
So I love this. The shift of I have to versus I get to. And when you think of how that influences the body, that simple perspective shifts will help us walk around the world in a different way. So then all of a sudden our posture changes because you're like, oh, I get to be here. Our mood shifts, our energy shifts, and the way that we're interacting with people shifts. So it starts influencing behavior. And that's why perspective is so powerful. When we can consciously shift our perspective, our behavior changes, our energy shifts, the way that our environment responds to us shifts. It's really, really powerful stuff. And I saw that you have a video on your Facebook page that I was watching about gratitude and the powerful effects of cultivating appreciation. I was wondering if you could share with our listeners a little synopsis of the neurochemical benefits of gratitude. You had a nice acronym that you were sharing, and kind of how gratitude might filter into our life, since we're talking about shifting our perspective to one of gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah. So with that whole perspective shift of I get to, like you said, it not only changes your behavior, but it changes your chemistry, because the story that you're telling yourself, your body is making that real. It's making it real. So, you know, not only are you going to stand different, but your heart's going to beat different. You're going to breathe differently. You know, those behind the scenes magical things going on with cellular repair and, you know, hormones and your endocrine system. All of that stuff is taking place depending on what you believe about your current situation. That appreciation post was inspired by one of my other teachers, the neuroscientist Dido Bala. He's located down in Miami, and he works closely with the Goldie Hawn Foundation, who has a big mindfulness movement and curriculum. And I've got to take several trainings with him and get trained in the Mind Up curriculum. Really good guy, really inspirational. But we were doing he first showed a video of people doing this practice, and the summary of the practice. So like the video that he showed us is people are like on this, you know, basically auditioning for like a TV show. They don't really know what's going on, but they're given a more or less like preliminary survey about how they feel and so forth. And then they get an assignment of writing a paragraph about someone that inspires you and why you appreciate them and all that. And then they're asked to call that person and read that to them. And that is like such a simple, like it's just like simple, obvious, like, oh yeah, duh. But like almost everybody starts crying. And it's like, you know, like it's, so not only did I like watch this video and then do this with a group and then watch how like crazy like the emotions got, like, you know, people just like welling up in tears and like sobbing and like, you know, all this stuff. Like really there's a whole depth of ocean where you just dip your toes in an exercise like this, and all of a sudden, whoa, we get just like washed over with the waves of like, holy crap. maybe I haven't been appreciating the people in my life, or being able, or having a reason or a know-how of how to express this appreciation. So the act of getting over it, what's funny when you watch it is like societally, everybody's first reaction, not everybody, but like a vast majority of everyone's first reaction, if they get a call from somebody reading about how much they appreciate them, people are like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? Like, is there something wrong? Like, everybody's initial reaction to being like openly appreciated is like somebody thinks somebody's dying, or somebody thinks they're about to get some really bad news, or something. Like our knee-jerk reaction is like to put our defenses up, because it's so strange in our society to just appreciate people, like just like wholeheartedly, thoughtfully reach out to somebody to appreciate them. Now, you can do that whole project, or it can be simpler than that. Just an easy little text message to somebody, an easy little gift of, whatever little thing, to just be like, I see what you're doing. I appreciate you. It's like a monstrous, powerful practice that you can do. And the chemicals, the neuroscience of it, that quote that I said, I kind of paraphrased it, but like, your biology's got your back. That was my guy Dito had said that. That was the first time I'd heard that. And he talks about oxytocin, the hug hormone, where you feel a connection to someone else. How if you hug somebody for 10 seconds, your body goes into a process of releasing these chemical compounds or whatever that heal your body. Also, I think the acronym that you're talking about is the word DOES, DOES, and that has to do with four compounds: dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin, and those are chemicals that make your body feel good. And by doing an exercise like this, you get a dose of all of these things. We're used to dopamine highs. If you eat something rich and savory, if you get notifications from your apps, if you have any addictions to drugs or food or whatever, that's all dopamine, where it gives you this spike of like feel good. It actually motivates you to go get that thing, but it doesn't last long. So we get addicted to dopamine. But really, the feel-good chemicals, the longer-lasting things that we want flowing through our body would involve that oxytocin, the endorphins, the serotonin, not just the dopamine. So realizing that feeling good is there's not only one way to feel good, but there's also several ways in which those show up in your body, and how to get a blend of all of those things instead of just one of those things. Because a lot of those things that give us dopamine in the long term deplete the other stuff. So it might make you feel good momentarily, but might make it harder to feel good in the future because of your relationship to it. So yeah, appreciating people. It is a free, huge dose of life. And I implore everybody to try it out.
Oh, that exercise sounds so powerful, because I know for me and people who I've spoken with, sometimes when you're having a crabby day, you just like kind of wake up on the wrong side of bed, or something really pissed you off. It's hard to like reach for gratitude. It's really hard to be like, I'm appreciative of anything, because you're just in a funk. But what I love about this exercise is that even if you're not quite feeling grateful, you can ping a friend, because part of gratitude is not just making the list and thinking of it intellectually, it's feeling it, because that's the neurochemistry. So you can just reach out to a friend or a family member, or tell an acquaintance or something, I'm grateful for you in this moment. And their response can kind of pull you out of that. Even if you're not quite feeling it by expressing it, you can send out that ping for help, like, oh, well, I'm grateful for you, and eventually work yourself up to feeling it, right? But even if you don't, just sending it in that list format intellectually. And when you get it back, sometimes you can't help but feel that response. So it kind of can pull you out of a funk. It's pretty powerful. That is the power of community. Thank you for sharing that.
And yeah, I like, I like that another like neuroscience aspect of it is mirror neurons. This kind of innate ability to mirror what's in front of you. So even if you're in a funk, if you do something that brightens someone else's day, it's going to brighten your day, at least a little bit. So yeah.
Mirror neurons are amazing. And for listeners who haven't heard about mirror neurons, essentially when someone's doing something and you see it, the neurons that are firing in their brain, you have a set of neurons that fire in response. And so you're feeling what they're doing. And essentially it's correlated to empathy in many ways. And it's an amazing process and thing to ponder. It makes sense to me, like if I'm watching a movie and someone gets like their finger chopped off or something, I like it's when you like cower, you're like, ow. It's because we can literally, to some degree, not all the way, but we can feel that pain. It's not just an intellectual thing. Our body senses it. So mirror neurons with gratitude can be an amazing way to stimulate some of that neurochemistry. We can rely on each other to help us get some of that. So thank you for that tip. So I want to pivot back to your creativity and how you create music. And I want to talk a bit about that. So in what ways do you feel like your relationship to music and creativity have shifted since you stepped into your path of well-being? Has your creative process changed? Has your music itself changed? If at all, like I'm not even sure if it has, but I'm just kind of curious around that topic.
Yeah, it has for sure. I guess two parts to it would be how did it change regarding my own kind of like personal exploration, and how did it change through COVID, because live shows were basically in hibernation for a while. So yeah, when I first started practicing yoga at Radiant Life with Matt Portwood, Jana Portwood, and V Boehm, she's also a musician. It was very much like, it just made a lot of sense because I was already trying to make like, I always viewed myself as like not mainstream hip hop. Like I wasn't trying to just be like bling bling. I was trying to be like counterculture to that, but also like, I don't know, it was a little bit less clear for me what exactly my message was, but I've always been into like ancient wisdom. I've always wanted to say things like, being on tour and playing like tons of shows, you realize you have to repeat these things over and over again. So I started writing songs with an awareness that like, are you gonna be able to say this like you mean it hundreds of times over and over again? So I've always been thoughtful about my lyrics and trying to aim for like a better message. Like, I shouldn't say always. Like not all, like some of my music is dumb college music, and just overall, whatever. But as I've progressed, I made more and more of a point to try to figure out exactly who I was as a rapper that wasn't just trying to rap about the basic rap stuff, trying to teach life, trying to be an MC. And ancient wisdom, there's always pieces. I listen to old music, I'm like, that was actually really, that was really profound. That was really wise and stuff from my early lyrics, but they're few and far between. When I first started practicing at Radiant Life, the producer Big Cats and I made a record in like 8 days, called Highest Self. I was very inspired by everything going on, and I was more or less like this little EP is all about kind of the stuff that I'm learning in yoga school, or the stuff that I'm getting frameworks to put into, whatever. So I made my first record while I was in yoga school, was called Highest Self, and it was about those concepts. And then that was probably 2016, end of 2016. And then my following record was called Deep Dark Hope, which was just a progression of that same thing. The more I was learning about it, the more I was trying to share helpful perspectives, also kind of documenting my journey, and I thought it was really cool. It turned out pretty neat. And that was my last record I dropped before COVID. By far my most successful as far as like being a cohesive snapshot of my life at that point, but it still holds the test of time. It's still like my favorite stuff, and that's going on 3 years ago that it was released. But the pandemic really changed a lot, because what I did, it was just like my creative time and space was no longer, because I'm such a show-oriented type of person. Like, I make songs so I can perform them. That's what I love to do. But when, COVID hit, I was like, my creative capacity should be going toward instruction right now. Like, how can I give people what they need? Like, I don't have a rap song to serve the people through these moments, but I do have a yoga lesson that I could make, and then so my shift really just went toward, how do I create content to share? And I think that's taken a lot of that same creative energy that I used to put toward music. Now that shows are coming back and stuff, and people are asking to, are you gonna play this show or whatever? I'm like, I've made maybe a handful of songs this year when I used to make a handful of songs every week, so there is an overlap, or there is, my creative focuses have definitely shifted way more toward, how do I create education? How do I create helpful instruction? How do I, not crowd the lane, or like take opportunities from these younger, hungrier artists that, there's only so many stages, there's only, whatever. So recognizing that, like, am I like taking opportunity from somebody who wants it way more than me? So music is definitely a passion of mine, because I love to create, but there's been so much need and demand and opportunity for me to create stuff regarding wellness, that's where a lot more of my time goes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because I feel that too. And I haven't danced in over a year and a half. I was a part of a cabaret group before COVID hit, and this is the longest I've gone without performing or dancing in my life. And I'm sure a lot of artists out there, yeah, it's like, where do you put that creative energy? And I totally feel that. Like, every time I write an email, even this, every time I prepare for a podcast interview, everything, that's all creative energy. And it's how we're channeling it. It's really interesting. And I also want to highlight what you said about creating the higher selves record in 8 hours. Okay, so what I find that wellness and wellness practices and nourishing the nervous system, one of the biggest takeaways for me, in addition to just feeling better, is high states of creativity. Because when you're in a state of survival, it's not optimal to create, just biologically. So when you're able to calm your system out of a state of fight or flight, of anxiety, creativity almost pours through you, marked by what might take a month to create a record. I don't even know how long, albums take to create. Was
like
happened in 8 hours.
Yeah, well, for
Long,
sure.
yeah.
I think
So
the whole
here's the
record
thing.
was like, it was like 8 days, but still, that was like super highly
8
creative.
days.
Yeah, no, but still,
8
you're
days,
right,
yeah.
though. They were so hand in hand related. Like
Yes.
being in yoga school, unblocking all these things, being very inspired by like how much work I had left to do, how clear it all seemed at the moment, where it's like, this is all new, and like I just got so much potential in everything. The storm alarms are going off, the tornado alarms, and my dog started howling. Anyways, yeah, so the creative blocks in like, this was in the same year of like me being in like a deep depression to being like liberated, or feeling like, it was very highly creative, very easy. I'm just like, I'm gonna sit down, I know something's good gonna come from it, because this is so helpful to me. And absolutely, the like yoga, meditation, everything, it just puts the noise away to make whatever you intend to do come a little bit easier. And jumping back to a Bruce Lee quote, or a Bruce Lee concept that I understood is like the Tao Te Jeet Kune Do is about the yin yang. It's similar to the yin and yang. It's there, the give and the take, the light and the dark. So some concepts that I took from reading his books was like the extreme opposite of one immediately follows the extreme of the other. So say you're throwing your hardest punch, like your yang energy. At the end of your hardest punch, you're the absolute weakest. So like that's this give and take. And his style, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, means being able to adapt. If your opponent or the world is coming at you very fiercely, it's like coil back. Use your yin energy to be loose and soft and ease back, because immediately following their hardest attack, they're going to be at their weakest. So it's about timing and coordination. It's about observation and response. And so this same concept applies to even how he throws a punch, whereas your muscles work in pairs, where your tricep extends the arm at the elbow, your bicep closes the arm at the elbow. And if you're throwing a punch, a inexperienced fighter is flexing both. They're trying to punch hard, and ultimately what they're doing is flexing the muscle that is slowing their fist down, and more or less working twice as hard to throw a half as effective punch. So the most effective fighter is always the loosest fighter, the most relaxed fighter, because it's about coordination. Where are you engaging and where are you softening? So the idea of throwing a punch, the idea of whatever you're trying to create, if you're not aware of the coordination of yin and yang, or these opposite energies going on, you're basically working twice as hard for half of the impact. So if you realize where to let go of stuff, where to soften, then what you're trying to do comes a lot easier. And I think that's what yoga taught me about everything, is hey, you don't force stuff, because you're going to get a way weaker result if you're just pushing it. It's how can you relax into this while being exerting the energy while not exerting energy to lessen your impact.
So good. This is what I work with my clients on, because I work with a lot of high achievers, a lot of hyper productive people who aren't necessarily buying into the fact that they just want to rest. They're like, well, what's rest going to get me? So then I go, okay, well, rest is good innately just because rest is good. But also rest is quite literally productive if you shift it into that perspective, because the results that you get when having that harmony between productivity or action and stepping back, your results are going to be way more potent, as demonstrated by this concept that you're describing. And so this feeds into my next question very well, because I work with high achievers, so a lot of high achievers listen to this podcast, and I'm curious, one thing that I like to ask anyone that I interview, I know you're busy, Chance. I know that you go from A to B to C. You have a lot of stuff going on. You have a family, you have kids, you have a dog, you have a house. It's a lot to keep up with. What do you do? What practices do you do to take care of your nervous system, to practice that softness?
Yeah, that's a good question. It varies. I try to always create time for whatever my body's calling for. I teach a lot of yoga, so I demonstrate the majority of the classes. So I get that kind of kickback from I'm teaching, but I'm also nourishing my body. But I know that's not going to be that's not going to be my whole self-care practice. So sometimes I get a lot of physicality while I'm teaching the yoga or whatever. So I've been into a lot of qigong, or seated meditation, breath work, stuff like that. So it really varies day by day. I was on a stint. Not so much in the past month or so, but we just had another baby. So I had a lot of really good routines that I'm trying to get back in place. She's 3 months old now. So I was doing qigong 5 days a week, like a half-hour practice. Very, it's just very slow moving. It's very energy, you know, based, where you're just feeling the energy, how your feet are touching the ground. Very simple. So I was doing that really routinely. Now I'm getting it in once or twice a week, but really it just varies. I always make some time. Seated meditation, I'm frequently doing. I'm doing a lot of, I'm always trying to train too. So I have, I'm getting trained in a couple curriculums. I'm working with Tools for Peace out of LA. So, with them, we're doing like in a 2 hour meeting, we're doing like, half hour or more of meditation and stuff like that. And then I'm like teaching like all the time. I'm going from one thing to the other, but basically like the hardest part of my work day is driving there. Like that's about it. So as far as taking care of myself, sometimes it's yoga, sometimes it's learning from new teachers, sometimes it's qigong, sometimes it's seated meditation, sometimes it's breath work. I always take cold showers. That's a type of meditation that I do, where very cold water stimulates a response where you want to like tense up, and just the act of calming your body and softening your body into that cold, like letting the cold in rather than trying to block it out. I do that every day. That's really good for your immune system too. I haven't been sick in as long as I can remember, knock on wood. But yeah, since I started making that a regular practice, cold exposure, that's been really good for my nervous system. It just helps me realize like, ooh, I'm really tight in the shoulder or whatever. Because when cold water rushes over you, you'll feel anywhere where you're holding tension, it gets loud. It gets, it gets intense. So, your jaw, your neck, your shoulders or whatever, cold water, that's something I do consistently.
Did you know that I got a horse trough for my backyard that I do ice baths in now? I don't think I told you
I'm,
that.
I'm gonna have to come over.
It's
Like
complete with
I
the
like
tent
ice.
sauna. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. And oh my gosh, cold is amazing. And it's funny, a lot of people are really resistant to it, but I love our shared passion of cold exposure because it has done wonders for my nervous system. I mean, you get in there and like for me, I'll almost start to hyperventilate a little bit or like I lose control of my breath. But I work with that and I consciously try to deeply breathe and then I settle into it and I relax and it just teaches you so much about your response and your nervous system response. So that's amazing. And what stood out to me is that you have daily practices. You also let them go if life gets in the way. And that's a part of this too. We don't want to become too rigid. And then your well-being is interwoven into your life. So even if, a listener is not a yoga instructor per se or a meditation guide, there are ways to create self-care along with your day. So as you're walking into work, you can walk in a way of mindfulness. That can be a meditation. There's ways to bring these practices into your day where it's not necessarily you have to carve out a chunk of 2 hours to be well. So there's lots of different ways to express that and nourish the nervous system. So I know, Chance, you have a lot of incredible classes in the Science and Magic portal. Actually, the Wim Hof breath work is one of my favorite ones since we were just talking about the cold bath. But you also have yoga classes, you have chanting. There's just so much goodness in the portal for our members. If listeners want to experience your offerings in other ways, where else can they find you? What do you have going on right now? What offerings do you have?
Oh man, there's a lot going on. Depends on where in the world you are. I have a weekly hatha class available through One Yoga that's virtual. So and I've got quite a few videos on the wellness platform called Wellbeats. You might, depending on what your job is, you might have access to Wellbeats through your job. They deal with a lot of big companies that provide that stuff there. You can always follow me on Instagram, Chance Connected, no spaces. And I've been working on a lot of the preliminary stuff to doing different studies regarding heart health. So I've been One is a study on men's heart health, and another study that we're on the preliminary phase of just creating is how forgiveness, mindfulness, and forgiveness help children's literacy. So those are a couple of the things I'm working on. But if you're looking for what I'm doing, there's lots of offerings that come and go. So follow me on Instagram or just email me at chanceconnected@gmail. You mentioned working with high performers. I help a lot of people in the same realm. People that have high stress, high impact stuff, and how is it that you clear away what really matters? How do you separate the essential from the routine kind of noise? I want to give a shout out to one of the people that I worked with. Sam Kavanaugh just became the champion of Jeopardy. I was very humbled first off to work with him, and then not even fascinated and not surprised that he won. He made it through the whole championship. That's what he initially had started talking to me about how to prepare for this Hall of Champions where they're shooting back-to-back episodes and just high pressure stuff, and it's obviously very intellectual, but it's performance based. So there's just a lot of things that happen when the pressure's on, and I love working with people that have stuff like that going on, whether it's creativity, performance, just the corporate grind and high pressure and having a team of people looking up to you and leadership and all that stuff. I'm really pretty confident that I have helpful perspectives to offer into that stuff. All types of life stuff.
Amazing.
Parenting,
Yes.
all that.
Oh, I love seeing your kiddos whenever, you bring them, you would bring them in the COVID era via live stream to our Zoom meetings. It was so fun. You'd be doing jumping jacks.
I got one
with
reading
them
a
in the
book
background.
right here. Come here, baby.
What's that?
What do you... I got one sitting right here. She's reading her book.
Oh. Hi. You're so you, Chance, and it's such a gift to all of us, and you have so much goodness to share. If you could leave listeners with kind of one thing, one nugget just to leave our listeners with, what would that be? Just to kind of end this. One piece of advice from all of your wealth of knowledge and experience, or what's on your mind.
Yeah, you got to take time to make time. That's what it is. You have to take the time to make the time, and it's really fascinating how much time we do have in a day, no matter how busy you are or no matter how busy you feel. When you start prioritizing taking the time to make the time, everything else just falls away. The noise, the routine, and you might notice that you've been spending a lot of your energy on things that are actually only holding you back. So take the time to make the time. You have the answers somewhere inside you, but they're not just going to pop up. You have to dig for them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here on this podcast, Chance. It's so wonderful. Hopefully we'll have you on again.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.